The manual is an instruction manual for personnel to recover crashed saucers and ship the parts to the various places. It does include special procedures for shipping from overseas. And so in that sense, it embraces the overseas aspect.
Right. It's important to remember it is a field manual for troops in the field. And I think that this was, it didn't give a very broad overview of the program or maybe the other foreign intelligence that may have been available, but it was sort of a how-to manual. And when you look at the mundaneness of crate packing, it is almost an identical copy of an existing field manual, Army field manual from Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania, where they have a reservoir of all these manuals. And you can find the references in the back of the manual perfectly line up for the era, and some of the documents changed shortly thereafter the manual was printed in April of '54. So it's interesting that it's such a tight fit to that time frame. And even you might say that the fact that it's just about recovering wreckage and so forth, and not about all the other aspects that you mentioned, lends towards its authenticity rather than detracts.
There are some other subtleties associated with the language too. For example, the use of the word screwdriver is two separate words, is the way it's shown in the manual, and that is consistent with what was in the dictionary like in 1949. And then over the next decade, it changed to one-word use as the application to a vodka drink got more prevalent.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned some of those things. I mean, the first thing I think of is the control page in the manual. At first, the control page was not distributed because Don Berliner didn't perceive it. And then later it was discovered, and the control page has specific changes in the manual, and then initials and authorizations. And some of the initials, the JRT and EWL, we've been doing research and trying to identify those specific soldiers that would have been responsible for that in the Kirkland Air Force Base phone book. Stamped inside the manual is Unit KB-88, Building 21, Kirtland Air Force Base. And we found there really is a Building 21. It's now called Building 750. And we can't determine whether or not there was a Unit 88, but we're in a correspondence with the historians of Kirtland Air Force Base, and we've been given verbal authorization to get the historic phone books to review and look for EWLs and JRTs, and then ultimately find those soldiers and ask them those questions.
Well, we certainly welcome criticisms or concerns about the authenticity of the manual. In fact, we keep a running list of the best way to deal with those concerns. And well, one of the concerns, for example, was a raised Z. And what happened was, when I first met with a specialist at the government printing office and asked him, I said, well, what do you think about this manual, this document? Does it look authentic to you or not? And he studied it and puzzled over it for a little bit, and he said, well, it looks to me like the type is right, monotype modern. And then he looked and he says, and it's interesting, he said that every so often the Z's are raised like we used to get in those days. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, because once in a while in letters that were not frequently used, they would only have a few master brass letters in the stack, and then every so often you get some sort of a piece of lead on the bottom, and you would find a repetition of the Z being raised in particular. So my partner's son went to the Stanford Library, and he found a document that was authentic, 1954, with just a few raised Z's.
And you actually see lots of variability in the E's, in the A's, not so much on their lining up, but the formation of each of those letters when studied under 400% magnification. You can see that it's a mechanical process.
And the answer is that as Stan Friedman and I followed the trail of the Special Operations Manual, he continued to receive correspondence from Timothy Cooper, including copies. And I didn't know that. And then, as we were talking along, he said, well, I'm getting stuff from a guy who lives in California. In fact, he says he lives a lot closer to you than I do, Big Bear Lake. Why don't you go up and visit him? So I called him and went to visit this guy, Tim Cooper, and he said that over all the years that he'd tried to get some interest from somebody in the UFO community, I was the first person to drive up the hill and say hello. So he was therefore motivated to exchange information, and after a couple of meetings with him myself, then Brian and I met with him together. We've probably had 6 visits, many dozens of hours.
Yeah, 20 or 25 hours time with him.
Now, Timothy Cooper's background is that he grew up in near Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, and one of his close relatives was assigned there to work in the Army, and he had an unusual experience where he was asked apparently to run copies of a classified report which had to do with the crash recovery of a UFO. And he told this story to Timothy, and that caused Timothy to get some interest, so that as of 1988, Tim began to file Freedom of Information requests that ultimately transcended 12 different agencies. He has 5,000 pages of Freedom of Information request responses in his living room.
Well, he basically has six different source elements. The first element was the Legionnaire. He met at the local Big Bear Legionnaire, who gave him the air accident report, which he later forwarded to Leo Stringfield, who published it in his book Status Report number 4, I believe. And then he had another source, a CIA archivist, who apparently contacted him and met him in person in a parking lot and handed over the Marilyn Monroe document, which mentions MJ-12 and the 5412 committee in the lower left-hand corner and signed by James Jesus Angleton.
Now, was that an original document or was it a photocopy?
Both are photocopies at present. And then the next source or rival was Cantwheel, the alias Thomas Cy Cantwheel, as we've come. I think Cy is his middle name or first name, but Thomas Cy Cantwheel. And you got mailbox drops first, and then there was an in-person meeting with Tim. And then Salina.
There were 3 mailbox drops and then a meeting.
Right. Then Salina, the daughter of Cantwheel, a year later, sort of, I believe after Cantwheel passed away, sort of wrote a note and attached more documents that said, my father's dying wish to the effect is that you have these. And so they were delivered.
And then finally, in 1999, on July 9th, he received a package from a source called S1 in the mail, and also a package from the source S2, which included a large manuscript that was originally unclassified, that was stamped Top Secret Magic. So those are the 6 sources that Tim Cooper winds up being the conduit for.
Now, it's important to emphasize that, Tim tried to correspond with Dick Haynes and Tim Good and Stan Friedman and maybe a couple other serious researchers, and wrote them letters, gave them documents and so forth, tried to get them interested at all, and they weren't really responsive or interested. And from 1992, I believe, to 1996, until we got involved, he just kept them in his attic. He was kind of like, I'm not sure they're real at all.
He was quite skeptical.
He was very skeptical. And he wasn't out to make money or do this or the other thing. He just sort of sat on it. He has a full-time job as a security guard.
What is it about these latest documents which have got you to, I think it would be fair to say, excited?
Yeah, it's the original paper and original ink and original typewriting. That's the #1 thing, because those are all forensically testable. And then the sheer volume of material, the sheer volume of original obscure material.
When you talk about obscure material, what do you mean obscure material?
Well, things that you couldn't even contemplate fabricating unless you had a degree in military history, had 10 or 20 years as an archivist in one of the many presidential libraries or national archives. I mean, you need those skills to try to create or fake something. They're just
the most
weird
recent
or difficult to find.
Yeah.
The most recent documents that have arrived really contain quite a range of material, in the sense that some of it is stamped in red top secret Majic or top secret MJ12, and others of it are merely newspaper clippings that were included in the original Blue Book files. So
now we're talking, forgive me, we're talking about Blue Book documents that are not contained in the National Archives.
yes,
New Blue Book documents.
new Blue Book documents. Many of the documents are unequivocally Blue Book documents. One of the documents not only references Blue Book in sort of a notation on the upper right, but it also identifies MJ12 and paperclip files, all in the same document. But the document itself is a publicly available technical paper on nuclear propulsion.
Right. Yeah, that's actually one of the ones that are posted on the website on www.majesticdocuments.com. Is we posted the first 10 or 15 pages of a report on isotope thermal thrusters by John Martinez, who is alive and well today. And this report is stamped top secret Majic on it. It's a photocopy now, but the man's alive. He has the right expertise and background. Everything sort of checks. The only thing that hasn't been done is to go confront him or ask him, did you write this? And that's a tricky situation, because I believe for the first time we have somebody who's fingerable as a source for reverse engineering and reverse sciencing. Here's a technical paper with top secret Majic on it that's talking about propulsion technologies in the 50s, or actually his papers are from the 50s in some cases, but this is actually a 1968 or 69 paper.
So it may sound an obvious question, but how can we approach this guy?
Well, the first thing he would do, suppose he's still cleared, he would call a security office and say, Bob and Ryan just came by to visit me and asked me about classified material. What should I say? How should I deal with that? I want to plan that and think that through a little bit.
But is this a name that's, you know, it's out in the open?
It is out in the open, but nobody really understands to go find him. Except until now, I just told you.
We have a long list of actions that we should be taking. One of which is, for example, contacting Dr. Ray, REA.
There's a lot of names in these documents,
that's right.
isn't there?
Right, and then the 93rd Technical Services Unit, I have the complete roster. These are the people that recovered the wreckage from Roswell, according to the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit. Detachment 3 ran around, picked up all the wreckage and so forth. There's 160 and some odd names of privates, sergeants, PFCs, so forth, that were responsible. And I've found 30 of them on the internet, on Yahoo search, people search. And I started calling some of them. And the question is finding the people that are in Detachment 3. Some of them have recalled, yeah, I was in New Mexico, I was there, but not talking about anything unusual. It's like, I picked up rocket debris all summer long. That's what happened to me. That was one case, and we have probably another 20 witnesses that can be researched that are easy before you start getting the names that are exceptionally difficult to find.
It clearly gave the coordinates of landing zone 2. And my first question is, I wonder where that is. I said, Ryan, do you have a topo map to go look? And so he did.
I got several copies and mailed them to all my friends. And sure enough, about 800 feet or so from the Trinity burst is this longitude-latitude coordinate. And then the challenge is, well, we need an aerial photograph of this particular site. And what we found was, I went to the Whittier Archives in Southern California and went and found aerial photography of the Trinity Burst site. And this is the Trinity Burst site in the center with a fence around it. This is dated September 23rd, 1948. You'll notice in the lower left there's also a small circle and a round zone around that.
Yes.
And that is the coordinates of LZ2. And I found this particular picture before the summer drops happened at all. I mean, like March or April of this year. And then later in the summer, we got a picture in a separate envelope that was this picture. And this picture is a leaked photograph from source S1 that shows a Trinity Burst, a little 100-meter thing, and then a clear zone in that lower left-hand corner that has, you know, more trampling and a bigger security circle around it.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to note these two particular photographs, clearly showing that something happened. The next photograph we want to get is the one that's dated, you know, June 30th, 1947, that there was nothing there.